Hello everyone, today we're going to go over my Ableton template and I'll show you which plugins I use, why I use them, and why I have my template set up the way that I do. So let's get to it. Okay, the first thing that you'll notice are these red tracks, and what these red tracks are buses. I have a Vox bus, I have a high range bus, and this is for any instruments that's from 4K up. They would go on this bus. This is my mid-range bus, and this is for any instruments 250 hertz up to 4K. They would go here. Next is my bass bus, and this is for any kick, sub, or anything like that. Bass instruments, they would go to this bus. The next one is my kick bus, and then there's my drum bus. If I open up my drum bus, you'll also see a snare bus, what goes to the drum bus. Hat bus also goes to the drum bus, and some percussion audio tracks. So the next one is to master, and when I produce in the box. When I mix outside the box on all hardware. So when that hardware signal comes back into Ableton, this is the track that it comes back on. My sends and returns are, first is a quarter delay, half delay, vintage delay. I use that for the vocals, a reverb, a drum reverb, and a drum amp, and I'll explain all of that. Here's my master track. These are the plugins I use on my master track. I'll explain all of that later. I stay in session view. I like to do everything in session view, and then I switch over to the arrangement view when it's time to put the song together, when I'm a little bit more than halfway there and I know what the structure is, and then I'll go over the arrangement view and put it together. But this column would be for my intro. If I have an intro to a song, this would be for the verse, and then this column would be for the hook. All the way over to the left, I have sample chops 1, sample chops 2, and anytime I may flip an old song and I chop it up, I store all the original chops in these two columns. This next one is called a record, and I use this for whenever I record anything from like YouTube or anything from my computer. I record on this track. So let's start off with the Vox bus. On my Vox bus, first plugin I have is a compressor. It's an Ableton stock compressor, and I just use this to side chain the kick bus. So whenever the kick hits anything on the Vox bus, it'll automatically duck it, and I can control how much it'll duck it by adjusting the threshold. Next is a BX Townhouse Compressor. This is a SSL style compressor, but it sounds a little different. I use this preset Vocal Bus Easy because what it does is it brings the vocals up a little bit. It brings them to the front of the song just a tad bit, and I'll let you guys hear that. Next thing in this chain is the Uad Spl Vitalizer. This just makes the vocal a little bit more, it brings a little bit more clarity and life to the vocal. So you can barely hear it, but it's like a little sprinkle, and it does add a little something to the vocal. And last in this Vox Bus chain is the EP34 tape echo. And what this does is it puts a little echo on the vocal. You can't really hear it when it's mixed in with everything else. Doesn't do too much because I use this preset called Sound So Sweet. It's a nice little sweet spot for the vocals, especially when you mix it in with everything else. So when I open my Vox bus, I have 2 MIDI tracks. All my MIDI tracks are in white. So this is a free MIDI track. Nothing's on there. And this one, it says play. This is my East-West Composer Cloud, and I use this strictly for these 4 vocal VST instruments: the Voices of Opera, Voices of Passion, Voices of Soul, and Voices of the Empire. My audio tracks within the Vox bus are all in orange. Each track has a filter that I put around 1K, 1.5, to take all the bass out the vocals. It also has a console 1, and the console 1 also has a filter. Each track that I use in Ableton has a console 1. So I'll just play this vocal real quick so you can see.
Live another life, live another life, live another life.
So I can adjust the bass in that vocal by adjusting the first filter. So
Live another life, live another life, live another life.
But usually I want all that bass in there, so I just always have the filter set around in this area between 2K and 1K.
Live another life, live another life.
And then console 1, I put another filter on there just in case. But usually this first filter is all it needs. But in console 1, like I said, I use it to gain stage. I rarely ever use the transient shaper, more or less the filters, sometimes the compressor, but not really too much. So in each audio track within my Vox Bus has the same thing. First filter, then console 1. And if we go back to this vocal sample, I'll show you the BX Townhouse Compressor and how it sounds on and without it. So this is with it dry.
Live another life, live another life, live another life, live another life.
And then when I turn on the Townhouse Compressor, you'll see how the vocals will come up front.
Live another life, live another life, live another life, live another life,
Off.
live another life,
On.
live another life, live another life.
So it's very slight, but it just adds to the texture of the vocal. We'll play it again, and this is with the EP34 tape echo off. And then I'll turn it on, you'll hear like the slight echo.
Live another life, live another life.
This is with it on.
Live another life, 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 live another
This is with it
life,
off.
live another
And when I turn it
life,
back on,
live another life, live another life, live another.
so that's my Vox Bus. Next, we'll get to the high range bus, and the two plugins I use is the EP34 tape echo. Once again, I use the same preset, Sounds So Sweet. And then after that, I use the Parametric EQ, and this EQ is great. This is probably the best EQ you can use from mid-range to highs. It specializes in that area. Now, when I go to mix, I keep the EP34 echo, I keep that on, but then I turn off the Parametric EQ, and because I have the hardware version, and I pretty much use the same settings. So when it's time to mix, I turn this EQ off, but then I turn on the hardware version, and then I have two LA2A hardware clones that it goes through also. And I do it that way because VSTs, they don't really have that weight that, you know, if you get like a hardware synth or something like that, the sound just has a little bit more weight to it. So what I do to compensate is I send all of my instruments through a hardware chain, and I use the Parametric EQ because, like I said, it's perfect for mids and highs. But then I warm up the sound by running it through those LA2A hardware clones that I have, and it does a really good job. So opening up the high range bus, I have about, let's see, 6 MIDI tracks. And what I have a Captain Chord, I have a Captain Melody, I use Easy Keys, I have Omnisphere, Loop Cloud, and then I have another MIDI track just open, and I can bring in any VST I want. In this bus, I have 6 audio tracks. Each one has a console 1 on it. After that, I use a EQ-wise Parametric EQ, and the reason I use that because with the British A-Class, everything is stepped. So like if I go here and I use the filter, it's at 45, then it goes to 70, then it's 160. So everything is pretty much set. If I need to be more precise with my boosts or cuts, then I go ahead and use the EQ-wise. So like I said, it doesn't add any more harmonics to the sound. It's just there for any surgical purposes that's needed. And you'll also notice in the high range instruments, all my tracks are green, and they're light green because that represents the high frequencies. Next is the mid-range bus, and on this bus I don't use any plugins at all because usually I use this bus for guitars, and I like my guitars, I don't want them hitting any plugins. I want them going straight to my Neve 551s and my Neve 535s, and that's a Ductor EQ and a Uad bridge compressor, and trust me, it makes a good guitar just sound amazing. Well worth the price. To get a pair of 551s and a pair of 535s is going to run you around about $2,200. Well worth it. That's $2,200 for each pair. If I open my mid-range bus, I have a Unify VST instrument. That's great, especially for layering instruments. I use that to layer different guitar sounds. So if you don't have Unify, I think it costs like $50 or maybe $90. I'm not really sure, but great plug-in to use. Next is Contact, and I already have the guitar set up. One of the guitars set up on here, and that's Evolution flat wound bass. Love the sound of that guitar. After that, I have 2 audio tracks, and once again, Console 1 British Class A, and I use the EQYs again for surgical purposes that I can't get by using the Console 1. And you'll notice that the color of green is like a mid. It's between, it's not too bright, not too dark. Right in the middle, represents the mid range. Next bus is the bass bus. And on this bass bus, you'll see that I have 2 Ableton stock compressors. One side chains the kick bus, one is side chain to the snare bus. And that's so the kicks and the snares can both cut through the bass, and I can adjust how much they cut through the bass by adjusting the threshold on both of them. After that, I have a red DI box, and I use this to thicken up the bass, and it thickens up the bass without distorting it. Great plug-in. If you don't have this, get this. It's by Kush Audio. Next plug-in is another Vitalizer, and after that, I use a UAD distressor. And the presets that I use between the distressor and the Vitalizer, one is the punchy dry low end, the other one is the bass tightener. Using both of those presets really tightens the bass up. It doesn't let it get all wild and sloppy. It sounds right. Now, when it comes to mixing this SPL and its distressor, I turn both of them off because I have the hardware version. So when it's time to mix this bass bus, I keep these 2 compressors on the side chain. I keep the red DI box on, but then when it's time to mix, I turn off the Vitalizer and I turn off the distressor, and I use the hardware versions. If I open up the bass bus, I have my 3 favorite plugins for bass is Bassmaster, Sublab, and Trillion. I have 4 audio tracks for bass, and first thing on each audio track, I have a utility plugin. I make the bass mono, followed by a Console 1, once again the British A class, and if I need to be precise, once again I use the EQYs, and I use that on all of my bass audio tracks. Next is the kick bus. On my kick bus, I use a Smack Attack, the Chandler Limited Germanium Compressor, one of my favorite compressors. I was actually gonna buy the hardware version of this, but why buy the hardware version and spend $3,000 when I can just spend $250, buy the software version, and it's gonna do exactly what I need to do. After that, I have a L2, and I have a RC20, and I just use that if I want the vinyl effect or some type of crackle effect every time my kick hits. But I rarely ever use this, but it's there if I need it. What the Smack Attack does, it just gives my kick a little thump, not too much. And I'll play a kick real quick just so you can hear it. So let's turn off everything, and I'll do it with the Smack Attack first so you can hear it. Anytime I use my plugins, I just use them a tad bit. I never really push into my plugins. I push into the hardware. With the plugins, I just sprinkle a little bit here and there just to shape the sound that I want. So we'll start with the kick. I'll play it, and then I'll turn on each plugin and let you hear what it does. This is the kick dry. You know, nothing special. So when I turn on the Smack Attack, you're gonna hear the transient hit just a little bit hard. This is off, on. See, it hits a little bit harder. Now, what the Germanium compressor does, it adds weight to that kick. So first I'll play the dry signal with just the Smack Attack. And then I'll add in the germanium and you'll see. Here we go. That's dry. Here's the germanium. Instantly wait. Here's the germanium off. Germanium on. Now I'll do the L2. I really don't hit it too hard with the L2. More than likely, I'm gonna turn it off when it's time to mix. Here's with it off, and then I'll turn it on. Here's with the L2 on. Instantly make those kicks pump. Here's the chain off. Here's the chain on. See how heavy those kicks sound now? So that's my kick bus. I have 2 kicks on here. Each kick has a utility. They're mono, has a console 1, and then a mixed in key. And I use the mixed in key just to find the key of the kick and make sure I tune it in with the song. So if we go to this first kick, I have kick 1 and then I have low kick. Because what I do with my kicks is I just use one kick and I duplicate it. I actually have a tutorial on this, but so if I bring up the console 1 of my first kick, it has a low cut at 88. I'm pretty much trying to get rid of all the subs and just I want my first kick to be a little bit more crispy. If I go to the second kick, I wrote off all the highs and I have all the subs in there. And there's a reason for that, because on my second kick, which is just a duplicate of the first kick, the second kick has the mono signal, it has a compressor, and what it does is it ducks the first kick. I have a console 1 on here, and then I have this thing called low air, and I use subharmonic. So basically my second kick is the same as the first kick, but it ducks, and then it just brings all the subharmonics, and I can always adjust it for taste. So if I let these kicks play again, I'll take out the second one. And then if I dial in the sub on it, and I can always adjust the volume and add however much sub I want, or subtract the sub out of it. And that's why I have my kick set up like that. Next is my drum bus, and on my drum bus I have the same exact plugins I have on my kick bus. The only difference is that the kick and the drums, when it's time to mix, they go to different hardware chains. If I open up my drum bus, I have a snare bus and a hat bus. If I open up my snare bus, I have 2 snares, 2 claps. If I want to audition a snare, audition a clap, I have tracks for that. If I open up my hat bus, I have it says hat bus, but it's like, this is the bus like for hi-hats, open hi-hats, cymbals, rides, crashes. I put them all in here. And then these 3 tracks on the end, it says perk 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are percussions. Those are for toms or anything like that that's a little bit more heavier. They'll end up in here, but they all go to my drum bus. Each snare also has a utility on it, making it mono. There's a console 1 on it. The lows are automatically filtered out, and there's a mixed in key because I like for my snares to be in key with the song also. So that's one there. If I go to the hat bus, I have 2 Ableton stock compressors and their side chain to the kick bus and the snare bus. So when a kick and snare hit, the hats duck it, and I can always control it with the threshold. And I have a console 1 on my hat bus too to control the sound. The next one is to master, and like I said, this is my hardware signal that comes back in. Okay, over here we have an Echo Boy quarter note delay. The next one is an Echo Boy half note delay. After that is the delay, vintage delay. I use this on vocal samples. It makes the vocal sample sound fire. Trust me, if you don't have this Valhalla delay, get it. Next is reverb. Right now I'm using a mega verb, but it'll change. I use this Lexicon reverb for my drums. And then I use this amp on my snares. This amp would make your snares sound fire. Trust me. Just put it on there, play with the settings, get it to the taste, whatever taste that you like. But this amp will make your snares sound fire. Next is the master track. So the first thing on my master track is 2 looperators. Next is halftime. If I want to use halftime on the track, if I want to have to halftime the track, if I want to automate the halftime, it's there. This RX 950, I only use this to check the mono signal, to check how to mix sounds in mono. That's the only reason I use that. Next is the RC20. If I want to put a little, vinyl touch on the whole mix, I can do that if I want to. It's already set up and already there. Now, this Frontier limiter, the only time I use this is if I want to post a track on SoundCloud or YouTube or something like that, and it hasn't gone through the mixing process. So I'll just turn this on. It makes the track super loud. And when I want to post it up, that's the only time I turn this on. I never mix into this. So if people always, I see a lot of people mixing into a limiter. I never mix into a limiter. I just use this when I want to post up a track that I've done. Other than that, I use the inflator. This is always on. If you don't have this, go out and get it. This should be one of your first plugins that you buy. Trust me on that. I'll do a little tutorial on this later on, but this is a must-have right here. The next one is the Drummer S73. I keep it to a 50% mix. The gain is at -3. I don't push through this too much. I use this preset Clarity 1. It cleans up the mix. Love that plugin. And last but not least is my Loudness Penalty. And I use this to keep a read on how everything will sound. If I'm going to post to YouTube, Spotify, Tidal, iTunes, Amazon, whatever. Love this here. If you don't, that's another great plugin to have. If you don't have it, go get it. And that's pretty much my template in Ableton. This is what I start out with. This is what gets me going to produce what I produce. And it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Until next time.